Now, I love to tell stories, and anybody who knows me well knows that. And so, of course, I want to start off with one now. And it's about Naphtali. Naphtali, a young man overly eager to assimilate the teaching and experience of St. John of the Cross. And so, what happens? Uh, One day, he reads that from John of the Cross that all of our actions must be peaceful, gentle, and strong. Now, he says, now, how am I going to find out what this is all about? Um, so he goes to sleep one night and he falls into this insomnia, which goes on hour after hour after hour. Then the angel of sleep comes along and has pity on him. So he takes him into a dream, and guess who's in the dream? Jesus. And so Naphtali says, what do I have to do so that my prayer will be peaceful, gentle, and strong as advised by John of the Cross? Well, Jesus goes right straight to the point. He says, you have to lower the volume of your inner speech. So instead of speaking like this, it's like your inner speech this way, this way, this way. And you remember Elijah, for example, that he wasn't in the storm or anything, but in a still, small, quiet voice. And that is really what God really wants of us. Really, I believe that. So Jesus says, basically, you have two approaches to the inner voice. The first is saying, "Oh, Holy Mother of God, I love you." Okay, that's one. Then there's a second, and like I just said before, "Oh, Holy Mother of God, I love you." If I say "I love you," it's different from "I love you." You see, both are valid, but in this case, I think the second one lends itself to intimacy. And so we're going to be talking quite a bit about this. So the second is intimacy. The first conveys enthusiasm. Now, when Naphtali doesn't get it, Jesus says, you want the words spoken to God inside you to be peaceful, gentle, and strong? Yeah. But I notice that something is blocking the transition to a quieter tone of voice, a softer, more gentle tone of voice. And what is that? Because you consider noise and bad speech to be normal. And in our culture, and it seems incongruous for you to allow your internal words to settle down into quiet. The more you are quiet inside Naphtali, the more you will be quiet outside. And you have to understand that, because the more you're quiet inside, the more you're quiet outside, then people, if you're quiet enough, then people will start wondering what is going wrong with Naphtali. Is he depressed or repressed or what? So let me ask you another question. Let me ask you a question. Naphtali, you've heard of soul? Well, of course I have. Do you know what it is? Yeah. Well, what is it? Well, I don't know. I can't explain it to you well. The problem is, Naphtali, that you are taking something that's so powerful and unexplainable and relegating it to the outer form. We have the inner form, our inner life, and our outer form as given. And what's the problem is, like, Willie Humphrey is a great saxophone player, and you say, well, he has soul. It's very clear that he does. But you see him as an external figure which goes by the adjective or the noun soul. The same thing with other things. You can take another person who is in what we call Preservation Hall in New Orleans, you can say he's got soul, but again, you're talking about somebody who has soul and a figure standing in the French Quarter, which where Preservation Hall is. So, Naphtali, part of your vast interior space is inhabited by soul. It inhabits the endless interior land inside you where you could walk for miles and miles and find nobody but Christ. So, just then, I'm sorry, listen to me. You must listen to me. You're most like God when you speak on the inside as he does at a low, gentle level of speech, almost a whisper. So Naphtali's in the dream, and in his dream, suddenly he shifts images of what we're trying to transition into here to riverboats and stage lines and ancient railroads. When Naphtali prepares to sail around the great bend of a river, he wakes up and sits straight in the bed. And he pauses 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 20, 30 of absolute silence. He feels the silence inside him. He's making connection with that vast land where you could walk for miles and miles and see no one but Christ. And something happens. Something happens. And he says to himself, I finally get it. So I can't explain to you, any more than that. But I think so, and if you take away anything from this, it's try to speak, if you're going to speak with God internally, do the best you can to do it at a very quiet thinking level. So let's say, because if you say the Our Father, okay, you say, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be thy name, which is very different from Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You see the difference there? The difference? If you lower the volume of your inner speech, then immediately you're in a contemplative mode, okay? In a contemplative mode. I hope that this makes sense to you. I have a friend here. His name is Brother Callistus. We're fine. We're fine. We're fine. We're fine. Fine. Okay. All right. So that's a point, a very major point that I'm trying to get across to you. If you're praying the Hail Mary, it's you can say Hail Mary, full of grace. That's very nice. Or Hail Mary, full of grace. You have to put something very personal that you actually mean what you're saying. All right? Okay. A good way to put that advice of St. John of the Cross into practice is to engage in the form of prayer of this way, in which Christ sends a gift of breath to you, and you receive the gift, and then you return the gift of breath to him. So it's back and forth, back and forth. If we had time, maybe later on we can practice this together. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? All right. So give and take breath and take kindness and compassion backwards and forward. I hope that makes a little bit of sense, but we don't have time to develop that. So this prayer is very important. All right. Now, when I was preparing these reflections the other morning at 3 a.m., because we don't really follow a normal schedule, it's like I'm from New Orleans, and we had a writer who attended a writers' conference there, And after a week, she said, I have yet to find in New Orleans one single person that I could call normal. Really. And that she meant it. But I don't know what that means. But so it occurred to me, remind you of what some of you already know, and that's you already have all that you need to live an authentic spiritual and emotional life. All that you need. And it's like, I forget his name. Okay. So what does that mean? You have all that you need. Well, obviously, it's the image of God within you. So you get the image of God, and then you spend the rest of your life allowing for a gradual unfolding into likeness. Sooner or later, though, you become aware that we are not in tight control of this process. It cannot be tamed. If you've ever heard of spiritual teacher Sharon Salzberg, the way she puts it, life is wilder than that, than the control. It's a flow we cannot command or stave off. Now, when we say the divine image is gradually shifting into likeness, that means that not through imitation, but through spontaneous right action, we begin to live the qualities of God in our lives. So it was before, okay, we listened, but then now we're listening more carefully with great reverence, and that is the way Christ listens to us. And so we have certain kindness and compassion towards somebody. And that kindness and compassion is not superficial, it's very deep, because it is progressively more an expression in ourselves, an embodiment really of the quality in Christ, in the divine image of respectful listening. Okay? When we say, okay, so of course, obviously, when we talk about Christ, it's love without expecting anything in return. Okay. And that is the stance of the Father who welcomes the Son back, the prodigal son, to full stature in his family. But the elder son's furious reaction reflects the logic or illogic of the culture. It's both irrational, according to that culture, it's both irrational and wrong to take back someone who's returning for the wrong reasons, the prodigal son. Because he's back because he's fed up with his squalid living conditions in an alien land. The Father, his warmth reflects, though, the kind of love which is of God, without a single condition or a single if. At this point, I would like to offer you another story, and this will be the last one. It's about a young Cherokee Indian who is frantic as he tries to get his grandmother to listen to him. He shouts, "How could you deny our heritage? How could you adopt the ways of the white man whose violence disrespected and disrespects now our sacred land?" How could you conceal, even from your children, that you and they are Cherokee? How could you do something like that? Why? How? Now, a young Hawaiian might have hurled the same words at his elders and fellow Hawaiians. He might have shouted, "Why did you stand by as the white man allowed water to be polluted? And why did you and the elders not rise in protest over the desecration of our sacred places? Why? Why?" Now, the young man might have said this, but did not. Why? because he and his people do not dwell on what has been done and cannot be undone. In this respect, they resemble Christ, who at no time complained about a sometimes grievous matter, but chose instead to wonder, what might we do about this situation? What does or does not make sense? Now, the Hawaiians have always welcomed outsiders with aloha, a word that means the loving breath of God. Convinced now they are, in the past and now, that their reason for living is to bring aloha to this planet. An approach to life that vibrates through no force of habit, but rather as an unassuming, spontaneous happening, one which must include the realistic and innocent quality of acceptance, the opposite of passive resignation. I've had to live acceptance quite a bit in my life. Pretty bad circumstances, very painful childhood, traumatic in many ways. But then as I grew up, I had to be in the mode of acceptance, but not passive resignation. That's extremely important. And so I landed in the infirmary about 4 years ago, or 3. I lose track. And I had one god awful thing after another happen. Right now, I'm working with this neck, which used to be like this, and then I've gone through therapy and all kinds of things with the neck, and then I had a hole in my foot, the bottom of my foot, that took 4 or 5 months to cure. I was restricted as far as walking around. I was kind of a prisoner in my room. And all the time, I just had to accept and accept and accept. Okay. And that's extremely important. My sister had breast cancer, and she is a wonderful person in acceptance. So she accepted her situation and worked with it. And it has not returned. It's been 10 years. Recently, she had to be tested for the virus. And I said, well, that means you might have to be quarantined. And she said, well, I'm always quarantined. She's in her 90s. And she's, lives at home like that. So acceptance is very, very important. Very important. Now, our culture believes in the static and instantaneous. I think you know that. But a blessing bestows living, moving, evolving energy, which brings life to everyone. A free gift bestowed by the one who the Native Americans call the Great Spirit, and what the earliest Christians called Christ as the empowering presence of the Great Heart. Christ. Okay. All right. In India, there is a practice of what they call loving kindness, which is a very beautiful, powerful way of blessing. It consists of sending of a set of phrases that you need not use, but you come up with your own. And you just send love or loving kindness, metta, what they call, to, first of all, yourself, because in order to love others, I think by now, there has to be some acceptance and love and caring for oneself, both the outer form and the inner form less. Without that, then you're in trouble. And I'm sure you know that. I hope you do. And then, so then let's say you want to send this metta or love to yourself. So you sit quietly, and you do you do what you can to build up with yourself a warm environment, and that can be by calling to mind a person who has most loved you in your life, whether living or not. Then, if that doesn't work, then just keep looking for, someone from the past. You're bound to find somebody, but if you don't, you always have a pet. So be aware or remember the warmth and affection that you receive from the pet. Once you get into a form of a a very warm place, then and only then can you begin to say, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering, which is the standard slogans or phrases that are used in this particular meditation. But you can have, it's up to you to choose what you want to say, what your phrase is going to be. Some people express a desire for just one word. And for example, namaste, which is very powerful. It means basically I honor the divine in you, or I honor the beauty within you, or anything like that. I recognize the beauty that you are. But namaste is the equivalent of what God is saying to each of us every moment of every day and every night. Now, borrowing the words of the ancient poet Rumi, this is what Jesus thinks of us all the time. The magnificence of your beauty bewilders me. I yearn to see you with 100 eyes. That basically is namaste. All right. How many minutes have I been speaking? You recall?
Oh, about 25, I guess. Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
that much?
2.
That much? Oh,
I'm going to go as high as 23, but no lower than 21.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay. Well, then it's up to you to do the next step.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, let's see if we have any questions. Hey, before we get started, Brother Elias, I was going to suggest to everybody the flashing thing. I don't know if you can turn your monitor on and off, because I just want to tell everybody it's not a light. It's actually the monitor on your screen. I didn't know if maybe you wanted to try to just turn that on and off.
I don't know what the monitor is.
Okay, you know what? If it's not bothering you, I would just suggest to everybody else, maybe just put it on gallery view, and you're smaller, but your words are so beautiful.
All right.
Anyways,
That sounds good.
yeah. Does anybody like to ask a question? Just go ahead and.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be related to anything I said. Curiosity, anything.
I have one. Maybe I'll just start it off
and
get it rolling. Brother Elias, you mentioned something that really spoke to me when you were talking about we have everything we have here, but you said a phrase, and that was respectful listening.
Yeah, that's part of the divine image. The reason we have everything that we need is because God has blessed us from the very beginning with the image of God, which contains all of his qualities and characteristics, namely, or mostly, kindness, compassion, silence, stillness, patience, a very respectful listening, which conveys to the person you are listening to that I take you seriously, that I don't discount you. And that happens, of course, when somebody's been away for like 15 years and they come back and you say, you haven't changed. Well, how do you know I haven't changed? It's 15 years. But that would be a question of what we call discounting. And that's extremely bad news. There's a group in Northern Virginia, which reparents schizophrenics. What they do is they knock out all these bad or witch messages as they go, and they go back, knocking out all the bad messages to almost the point of infancy. And what they've found is that the primary reason for these kids who are prone to schizophrenia is discounting. And so, for example, in their childhood, one kid could come home and say, I am being bullied. And your mother might say, no, you're not. You're just making that up. Or, Dad, I need an allowance to do blah, blah, blah. He says, you don't need, we just gave you, you're making that up in your head, and so on. And so listening is absolutely crucial. And I thought all of you must know that. All of you must know that. To be understood. As far as I can see, I don't like it when I say something to someone and they say, oh, no, that's not true about you, because they haven't come into me, into my land, internal land. We have a guy here who consistently says everybody in this monastery is dysfunctional. I say, really? And I don't mean to be sarcastic or anything. I just say, well, that means for you to say that means you have to have had access to the interior lives of all these people that you call dysfunctional. Because otherwise you can't say that from exterior perspective, you see. Now that's a long way of answering your question about listening. I'm sorry that took so long.
Okay. No, we got a good question from Carol here.
Yeah.
Who asks, Brother Elias, what are your thoughts about the challenging times we are all going through this year? What practices can we use to increase our inner strength and faith?
Well, here at the monastery, we've found that being kind of restricted, cut off from the world, because our guest house is closed, the store is closed, everything is closed. Okay. So that means more interiority. We're not distracted by having to go out here and there and everything, even to the dentist or something like that. Well, for me personally, what this helped me with a lot is what has helped me for a good while now, quite a big while, and that is mindfulness. So originally I landed in the infirmary because I was falling all the time, like four falls in 2 days and things like that. Very dangerous stuff. And so they put me in the infirmary. I said, okay, it's all right if that's what you want. But what I found was, because there was this danger of falling all the time, I had to just completely slow down. And I did that in my room by walking very slowly and being aware of absolutely everything that I did. So if I wanted to open a door, I felt the doorknob, and I felt the turning of the doorknob, and then me stepping in. If I see a ballpoint pen, which is over this way or that way, I was aware of that. And what that did is to foster a deeper level of interiority. Because when you're aware of all that's going on without commentary, without saying, oh, I feel bad, this is bad stuff, I feel bad because, and so on. But without any commentary, just saying this is how it is. I think that's a very big thing you can do during the virus time. Because if you're confined to your house, you can just do this kind of thing. It sounds, to our normal society and culture, it sounds insane to do something like that. to walk about very slowly. Dom Thomas Keating was asked once, it wasn't a question so much as an accusation. He said, how do you expect us to be contemplatives in this world that is filled with chaos and noise and instability? And Dom Thomas just said very, very succinctly, he said, slow down and pray more. And that's really what a lot of it is about, because our minds can be so cluttered that we don't know what's going on inside or outside. And of course, we have all these thoughts going in around us and as chaotic thinking. What I found to be extremely beneficial was I became a teacher of transcendental meditation. And I went to Spain, Mallorca, for a year almost, in which every day we spent a lot of time in meditation. I mean, it was really all the time, except for, we were able to go for walks according to the counsel of our guru, Maharishi Mahesh. So some people said walk and talk, stumble and crawl and stumble and all kinds of things, silly things. But that really opened up an enormous amount of spaciousness within me, enormous amount of spaciousness. And with that meditation method or technique, I have grown deeper in the silence, interior silence through the years. So like 40 years now, or more. And you couple that with mindfulness. That's a pretty powerful combination, those two right there. Okay?
Great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, Brother Elias. Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry. Go on, Ed.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Right.
One of the lovely things I hear you talk about is the gift of breath. The
Yes.
gift of breath that God has given us. And why don't you share a little about that or that technique?
Well, that is, I made it up in a way. I call it the exchange of gifts. And it's very simple. We have to have breath to live, right? And so the whole idea is to open ourselves up to the receiving of the gift of breath. And then we receive it and then return it to God as our gift to Him. So an exchange of gifts, an exchange of blessings, if you will. All right. Now, what this means is that you close your eyes and you station your attention at the nostril right here, at the tip of the nostril, and then you wait. You're ready to welcome the breath. So then you exhale first, of course, and then you bring in the breath that's been sent to you by God. And you allow that to travel up your nasal passage, up to your forehead, and settling perhaps at the spot between your eyes. And that brings you to a different plane, really. And then, but you don't linger there. You just keep yourself there in some sense. And then you exhale, and then you go back and wait for the next breath from God. And then you shift your own breath to Him or her. And that's what it is. Very simple, no sound, no noise, no dialogue, no commentary, no nothing except the exchange of breath, the exchange of grace back and forth from the divine to ourselves and from ourselves to the divine. And it's important to remember that this breath is coming to you from within the vastness that God is. No beginning in time, no edges in space. Okay? And it comes to us and it is accepted not just on the outer level, but interior level of our own vast spaciousness. Okay? So it's an exchange, not just outer of breath and so on, but from the vastness of God to the vastness that we are, the immensity that we are, the image of God that we are, which in itself is extraordinarily unrestricted and immense and vast. Does this make any sense right now?
Yes, and thank you for that. It's a wonderful practice.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so simple. Just take in the breath, send it out, bring it in. I call it give and take and give, to and fro, in and out, and so on. Very simple. You can practice that for 2 or 3 minutes at a time if you want, or longer, maybe for 15 minutes or 20, or however amount of time is indicated, which only you can determine. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Brother Elias. We're going to go to Bill and then Virginia. I saw your hand up. Let's go to Bill first, and then we'll go to you. Okay, Virginia? Go ahead, Bill.
Yes.
Okay, Bill?
Okay. In our recovery tradition, we use the first phrase of the serenity prayer, which basically says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things we cannot change. You're sharing this morning regarding how to whisper that prayer, how to feel the words, and derive the power that comes from that prayer in terms of wanting serenity through acceptance of our reality. One of the I don't like to call it frustrations, but one of the issues that I have, and this prayer is repeated millions of times around the world, is how would one express the need to whisper that prayer instead of saying it in a perfunctory manner?
Okay. If I can answer that. How does it go? May I have the serenity?
Yeah, God grant me the serenity.
God grant me the serenity
to accept the things we cannot change.
Okay, I would change that to a direct speaking to your deepest self. In other words, may you, Bill, may you be granted the serenity and so on. Because otherwise you're saying it's outer, it's kind of outer. I don't know if I'm expressing this correctly, but turn anything around and direct it to your inner self and whisper to yourself. And it's a form of self-cherishing if you do that. Grant me the serenity to, okay. So you're appealing to God there, but then you can turn it around and God can be saying, you know, I want you to have serenity, you know. The term will of God is a mistranslation. It means in its original language, Aramaic, it meant yearning, longing, or desire. So instead of saying God's will for me is, you can turn that around and say, God yearns for you to do this. In other words, you're speaking to yourself, but God is yearning for you to do this. He's longing for you to do that, and so on and so forth. you take it out of the third person singular, or the first. I don't know. I didn't do too very well with all that grammar when I was growing up. But I think you have to understand what I'm saying. Am I, Bill?
Yes, sir. You sure are.
Am I making sense?
Yes, it is.
If you turn everything, because you're speaking on behalf of God during this practice. So through you, God is saying, may you have serenity. You see, right?
Yes.
Right? And that's extremely important. And if you stick with that, it's very beneficial. I can say parenthetically here that this metta, loving kindness, or unlimited friendliness, you just don't stay with yourself, of course, but then you're meant to transfer these phrases of blessing to other people. And in this particular practice, the first one besides yourself is your friend or neighbor. Then you spend some time there, and then you focus on an acquaintance who's not really terribly intimate with you. Then you go to someone who's kind of neutral, like a sales clerk or something in some grocery store or so. And then it's the exact translation of in this phase of metta is you send loving kindness to your, what they call your enemy. But the enemy is really just someone you don't get along with. So, that's quite, when you start saying your enemy, literal translation from the time of Buddha, that's very melodramatic, I think, and just doesn't convey what we're trying to get here. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Virginia.
Thank you. Namaste, brother.
Namaste.
I am a Reiki practitioner.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a retired nurse. I've been a nurse for 60 years.
Wow.
Almost.
Whoa.
57.
Whoa, that's wonderful.
Thank you. And somehow in my life, I've been guided to just sit with people.
Mm-hmm.
During the HIV pandemic, I was the house supervisor, and they would call me to just sit in a patient's room, and I would sit for 30 minutes or an hour without speaking.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 2 decades, I studied and practiced Reiki at Mount St. Joseph in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
And then I came into some dissonance. And the dissonance came from a declaration from the Council of American Bishops stating that the practice of Reiki was something evil.
Oh,
And they published this in, and we were allegedly forbidden from doing such a thing. Well, for me, the God in me, that whether it's with centering prayer, whether it's when I'm angry, this is what I say, I'm slapping you with love. Because I'm such a gentle person. If I would slap somebody, I'd let them know that I love them. And this is with my kids or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm pretty much living a very quiet life now, but I do practice Reiki, and I don't feel like it's the place of anyone. And I love Father Keating so much. When I met with him in Kentucky with Sister Mickey, and we had a Buddhist and other people with us, and he said it's the Christology. It's the love of Christ in whatever form it manifests.
Mm-hmm.
And my God is giving me permission to express love, to be love.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So I appreciate your presence with us today and sharing, and I wish you healing.
Thank you. Now,
Thank you.
let me comment on that. The sound ah, is considered one of the most powerful sounds in the universe. This is from linguistics or whatever it is. And I've heard this from two or three, I think it was, sitters who would sit, like yourself, would sit with a patient, a dying patient. And they would follow the breathing of the patient and accompany it with ah. So if he's and and if he went slower and then so these three people who are sitting with dying patients said in every case the dying patient came to, and in every case they said a version of the following: what was that thing you were doing? Now, remember, now the patient is out, completely out. And I said, well, what effect did it have on you? He said, well, it made me, I felt very peaceful, very peaceful. And they're in this land of, I don't know what. It's just incredible. Now, I used to be the novice director here, and I taught a form of the Jesus prayer, but not really. It was sort of innovative in some, and I had them on the in-breath at a very faint, soft thinking level, whisper or half whisper or whatever, a very low tone, yeah, Y-E, which was an abbreviation for Yeshua, all right? And so they would take in Yeshua by saying, yeah. And then on the out breath, which was a sign of resting in God. Resting in God. Because then you can make a case for that standing for Abba, Father. So instead of saying Abba on the out breath, it would be very tender, soft. In the in breath, contacting Jesus. Say, yeah. You following me at this point? You see what I'm saying? And that is a very powerful prayer. But I just want to point that out, that people like yourself sitting with dying patients experience the power of Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Brother Elias, would you like to go ahead and continue to talk to us, or how do you want to?
No, more questions. Oh, unless you want me to talk about how I became a monk.
Sure. I want you to talk about whatever you want to talk about. And then I have one other question after, when you're sort of done, that somebody wanted to question. But why don't you go ahead? We're at the top of the hour, but we have another 30 minutes. So.
Oh, we do.
Yeah, or however long you want to take.
Fine. Okay. Well, I was in Gethsemane. Well, I first went to Gethsemane when I was in basic training for at Fort Knox. Okay, that was in Kentucky, and I was absolutely overwhelmed by the silence that I encountered at Gethsemane. It just absolutely blew me away. And I think that was the seed of a monastic vocation. Then I studied for the priesthood for 3 years, and I said, this isn't for me. And so I felt called to our monastery in Virginia, Berryville. And that didn't work simply because there was a case of undiagnosed restless leg syndrome, which meant that I could not get any amount of very profound sleep. So that wore me down over and over and over and over again. So eventually I had to leave, not knowing why. I didn't know about the restless leg syndrome. But I said, there's something about me and my physical condition that does not allow me to be a monk. And so years later, I entered Gethsemane, which was a fantastic experience. But again, I started after 6 months, 8 months, it's wearing down because of the restless leg syndrome. And again, undiagnosed. So I had to leave Gethsemane. Then years later, I said, I know at 3 strikes you're out, but I'm going to take my 3rd shot at monastic life if they'll have me. So then I entered Conyers. Now, what preceded Conyers was an observership where you were with the monks for 2 months and you're living basically their lives. Okay. But it just didn't feel right. It just didn't. So I told the abbot, I'm not coming back. Oh, okay. And so I was a member of a artist colony in Louisiana, and that was fabulous. 15 art galleries with a population of 8,000 people. That's pretty remarkable. And I had a wonderful circle of friends, very astute and very deep in their pursuit of the inner experience. I had a wonderful social life. I had money. I inherited. I was a TM teacher, and so on and so forth. It was just great. But I felt that I needed to be stretched because I had all these wonderful things. I could do whatever I wanted to do anytime that I wanted to do it. So I said, no. And so I applied at Conyers, and the monk who was interviewing me said, why do you want to come here? I said, to be stretched. He said, to be stretched? Nobody's ever said that he wants to come to the monastery to be stretched. They usually say, I want to be a saint, I want to do this, I want to do that. But let's be stretched. Yeah, that's how it is. So they took me in. And before that, though, I have to backtrack. Of course, how did I become a monk? Well, that whole thing of being a monk just remained with me. Okay, and it wouldn't go away. And so I was living in this cottage in the artist colony, the more like in a forest almost. And I got the intuition that I really needed to go to the great pine trees. The great pine trees were about 1.5 miles away, at least, almost 2 miles. And around 1 o'clock, there's this strong sense of I need to go to the trees took over. And it wouldn't go away. This is absurd. It's 2 o'clock in the morning now. I'm supposed to walk 1.5 miles to see the trees? Yes, see the trees. And so very reluctantly, of course, I got up and walked out. Fortunately, it was a beautiful night, good breeze. And the closer I came to these pine trees, the deeper silence I experienced. And if you know what I mean by these pine trees, it's almost like the nettles are like hands or fingers pointing up to heaven. And I thought that was very symbolic. The closer I came, the deeper the silence was, both outside of me and inside me. And I said, what is this all about? So I just stood. I was alone. Nobody was around at that hour of the morning. And so I just stood in front of the pine trees, and 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes went by. The silence was there, the stillness. And all of a sudden, I heard a voice inside me. Of course, it had to be at a low volume of speech. You know, that's how God speaks. Very soft, gentle, low volume of speech. I couldn't make out what he was saying. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, am I hearing voices? Because I had made a pledge to God, a commitment early on, that I was not going to engage in extraordinary phenomena. And one of those phenomena was hearing voices. My goodness. So in a sense, I almost had to say, I can't hear you. Would you please increase the volume? And so the faint sound became a little bit more clear, and I finally was able to make out what he was saying. And it was, go to Conyers and you will be healed. I had a lot of healing that needed to take place. I said, oh my goodness, now what? So I went back. I ceased to hear the voice. It's just that one time. So I went back to my cottage. By that time it was like 4:30 or 5. And I said to myself, now what? Am I supposed to call them and say, I heard a voice that told me to go to Kindness to be healed? I'm going to say, Paul, it was my name before I entered. Paul, you are truly a New Orleans native, because what you're saying is extremely abnormal. Let's put aside this whole thing of a vocation and so forth. If you're hearing voices, well, I finally called the vocation director, and I told him exactly what I've told you, and I told him about the voice, and I said, oh boy, take a deep breath. What is he going to say now? And he just kind of leaned back and he said, oh, how interesting. I said, oh yeah, it's very interesting. And I said, is that an obstacle to your considering? No, of course not. People hear voices all the time. I said, wait a minute, what kind of voices are people listening to all the time? So anyway, they let me in, and they've been stuck with me for 26 years. And I haven't regretted it. It's been hard as hell. It's no picnic here. Honestly, it's just, the thing is, you face challenges, your interior stuff, exterior stuff, and so on and so forth. But you reach a point where you have to say, as Christ did when he was faced with a painful challenge, and he did, we know that through the Gospels, with the Pharisees and all this and so on. But he said, what will we do about this situation, this challenge? Does this make sense or not, to do this or that? And that was the mode of acceptance by Jesus, not resignation, obviously, not indifference. But for me personally, in this mode of acceptance, I was able to work with different things, knowing that I was working from within this vastness inside, which was the power of the Holy Spirit within me. And so if I accepted, it was only knowing that the acceptance was fueled by the power and grace of the Spirit in this vast territory that's inside me. And so there we are. And here I am, 84 years old, and I don't know how long it'll be before I reach what we call the vanishing point. So you never know. You at least you've seen me today, and that's the important. So I hope that if you have any questions about that vocation story, it's okay. Otherwise, we can move on. All right.
Yeah. Do you want to? Can I ask you the one remaining question that I have, and then?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
A good one. Bill asks, "This spaciousness you speak of, what is it really?"
It's in the word. It's in the formless. We have form, which is all our beautiful, necessary outer sphere of life, which is, of course, thinking, speaking, and so forth and so on. Then you have the formless, which is total silence. So it's a vastness that can't be described because it's outside of the area of speech and so on. It's a sense of spaciousness, of vastness, which you experience, but not as an object of perception, but as living within the vastness. So what I'm saying is, we can't, oftentimes in our culture, our society, religious culture, it's a question of God is separate from me, I'm separate from God. And so we'll say things like, I must place myself in the presence of God, but you're already immersed in God from the time he brought you into existence. So we never are separate from God. And so we're never separate. All of us, including all of you out there, have this spaciousness within. It just hasn't been tapped in some way. And that's why we encourage you to take part in practices such as what I've outlined today. But it's impossible. You cannot describe what is, it's like this. Suppose you're friends with John and you ask him, why did you marry Maureen? Because Jennifer is so much more attractive, so much more beautiful, intelligent, and so on. It was just kind of insulting when you come down to it. And you say, and he says, why would I marry the other one? Because she has looks and so on and so forth. That's wonderful. But I can't explain why I am in love with the woman I married. I think any of you who have been married or had deep relationships understand what I'm talking about. You cannot describe to another person, oh, I'm in love with this person, and this is what I'm experiencing. Ooh, can't do it. Not me, anyway. Not that I'm saying that I'm in love with anybody right now. we don't have any females around here. And the same thing with Conyers. Why did you choose Conyers and not Spencer? Spencer has beautiful liturgy. Not that we don't, but it doesn't compare to theirs. And you have this at Spencer, you have that, blah, blah, blah. And then you choose Conyers. What's wrong? What's the story there? And you say, I don't know. What do you mean you don't? I can't explain it to you. Any more than this guy can explain why he loves his wife and not the other one. Okay? And then finally, contemplative experience. Like I was sitting in the grotto at Notre Dame as a freshman. I spoke about this in my book, Tears of an Innocent God. And all of a sudden, I found myself incapable of speaking if I wanted, because the tongue felt so heavy. Then my senses were kind of bound, and the mind just turned into pure silence. And then before you know it, I was deep into another world, which I recognize as being the vastness of God. All right. How in the world was I to explain that? Because that is at the level infinity, which excludes language and so on. You know what I'm saying? And so impossible. So in all these three instances, it's impossible to verbalize that. You can use metaphor, you can use symbols, you can use everything you want, but doesn't get to the core of what you're experiencing. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. And does that explain a little bit, Tom?
Yeah, sure does. I think
Thank you.
start wrapping it up here in a minute, but I noticed that Cynthia had her. Cynthia, did you have a question?
Yes, I was going to say that.
Where is she? Oh, there she is. Beautiful Cynthia. We've been friends for years and years and years.
Yeah. This spaciousness, I
Yeah.
think, or silence is something that I think we can all relate to. We, you know, just walking into a church, let's say there's a church in the middle of an inner city.
Yeah.
Walk into that church and there is that beautiful hushed
Yes.
sense.
Absolutely.
That's entering into the spaciousness. Or and compare that to the extreme emotional psychological situation where you are completely gripped by some negative emotions.
Mm-hmm.
The opposite of that would be that inner silence, spaciousness. And even if we don't have a full sense of the infinite, you know, walking in the pine, you know, amongst the pine trees in the woods, when we've, you know, and after a half an hour, we begin to feel that. So we can begin to enter into that spaciousness. We can understand that, I think, from these kinds of experiences.
Yes.
Do you think that's?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Brother Elias, do you have any departing words for us? We got
No, just the points that I've made, I think are very, very important about your inner speech, because that immediately puts you on a spiritual platform, which is contemplative. If you keep it on the outer level, and Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. You don't say it that way, but Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. That's beautiful. But if you say, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you, that's extremely intimate. And that's all I'm saying. And also, send kindness and compassion to yourselves. Really. And there was, can I tell a quick story? Very quick. Okay. There was, have you heard of Deepa Ma? And Deepa Ma was she's quite a saint in India. And what happened was she was married, and her two children died within a space of months. Then, right after that, her husband died of a heart attack. And this so devastated her that she was immobile, in a sense. She just could not function. And she went to bed. And for a year, she stayed in bed. It was like a patient. Well, I don't know if I should say this. I won't say it. But something happened. Nobody knows exactly what happened. But she left her bed and she became radiant. Kind of like Bill Wilson, you know, the story of him. He was in a hospital, incontinent in bowel and bladder, like an animal almost. And at one point he called out, "If there is a God, show yourself." And all of a sudden, the whole room was lit up with radiant light. And I'm thinking this may have been what happened with her. I really do. But eventually what happened, she began to bless everything and everybody, including a plane going overhead. She'd say, blessing the train, the plane, or any other people. Just as we can bless people anytime we see somebody, say in a food store or in a movie place or anything like that, walking the street, internally at a low level of speech, say namaste, and you direct that energy to the person. You see, so you can do this all day long. Like that was part of my trip in the room. You know, I could pick out something. I say, oh, namaste, namaste, brother so and so, namaste. He had no idea that I was doing this. But what happened was, this is a conclusion of the story. A very disheveled man kind of came up to her and said, "You're mad, absolutely mad. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You're making a scene. You're a disgrace. Why are you doing it?" And she said, "So that I could say it's all right." He said, "What do you mean it's all right?" And she said, "You are all right." And he backed off. And he was speechless. And my God, what's going on here? The power of the energy which came to her from God entered that man as soon as she said, "It's all right." And that's pretty much what Mother Teresa of Calcutta does, or did. She'd go to a leper or something, and she would say, "It's all right." And that has a certain power to it. We can say that to ourselves when something comes up that is very painful. We can say, "It's all right," whisper it, "It's all right, it's all right." And that could be sort of a mantra that you use in situations. Is that
Can I make one comment? Thank you,
Please.
Brother Elias.
Yes, yes.
Yes, and then we need to wrap up. But Maggie, go
Okay,
ahead.
Yeah.
so yeah, this from Atlanta. Our two centering prayer groups are reading your book, Tears of Innocent
Oh,
God. And when you were talking about insult after insult
Uh-huh.
from your long sits, many people came up with questions about what does this mean, insult after insult. And so I was attempting to describe the unloading of the unconscious and so forth. But still, they had questions of what do I do with this? And I think you just answered it.
Oh,
It's all right.
it's all right. Yeah, I know. It's that was that meant difficulties, challenges, crisis, trauma, whatever it might be. It was his way. It was a very Rinpoche,
Yeah.
that such his way of saying, these are, you're going to experience insult after insult. It's a colloquial way of saying dealing with trauma or difficult situations. Okay, so I'm thinking it's Brother Callistus has just walked out, and I have no idea how to get off.
All right. Yeah. Brother Elias, we're coming to a close here, and I want to thank you for the abundance of wisdom and time that you spent with us this morning. We're in gratitude for that, and we're in gratitude for the 51 people who took time out of their day to sit at your feet and learn and hear some of the wisdom and practices that will be valuable for them as we all move forward on our journey. So we're in gratitude for that. One last request I have from you: would you send us all out into to love and to serve with a prayer or a blessing as we conclude.
Right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Please close the eyes. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for showering us with blessings, with aloha, with namaste. Thank you for bringing us deeper into the vastness that we all are, as connected with your vastness and immensity. Thank you for showering each person who's been with us this morning with the most profound and powerful blessing. And continue to shower this blessing on everyone. Thank you. Thank you and thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Well, it's my turn to say thank you so much for having me and putting up with my idiosyncrasies, such as they manifested.
Yeah. And I did want to mention that Brother Elias had some technical problems with his monitor. That's what the variation in light there was, and we tried to get Brother Callistus to resolve that, and we're unable to do that. So I appreciate all of our friends bearing with that, and I know we'll take home some fond memories.
Yeah, I wonder, is it some crazy force outside? First of all, the trouble with the sound, and then then we have the lights.
I'll tell you what.
You know, let me tell you what happened this. I was from 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock finishing up my presentation, so I was very careful to put it in a beautiful folder like this. And I have a red chair in my room. And I said, I'm going to put this on my red chair. Then I went to Mass. When I came back, there was this had disappeared from my red chair.
Wow.
Now, is that poltergeist? Or is it some mischievous brother? Well, he's supposed to be at Mass, so he shouldn't have been there. I don't know. It's the strangest thing in the world. Then I I ran almost desperate to my computer and pulled up my whatever texts and everything I had. And I could not bring it up. And I said, no, this is very interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We've had all this stuff, and God has gotten us through it, and it's been a blast for me, if I can say that.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you and Joe and everybody for your kindness and compassion, really. And I just am grateful to all of you out there who have been listening. And in a way, I've felt your presence, collective presence. And I'm very uplifted right now. And I can walk with a song in my heart.
Right.
Okay? Thank you. God bless.
Wonderful. Great.
Namaste.
Children said amen.
Manas namaste puna puna, which means namaste again and again. Thank you.
Yes.
Namaste.